welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. Very happy to be with you, as always, to bring you another author interview. As we get started with this week's episode, I want to remind you, as I always do, to please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching this episode on. It really does help get the algorithm. It does help the algorithm, gets the podcast out to more readers such as yourself. If you are also of a mind to help monetarily, you can do so by going to gsmcpodcast.net. There you can leave a tip, a donation, whatever you want to call it. It helps not only this podcast, but the network as a whole. Really does help us to get these author interviews out to more readers and get these authors, hopefully, some more readers as well. As I said, that is gsmcpodcast.net. If you want to help by leaving a tip, that is greatly appreciated. All of your support is always greatly appreciated, no matter what form that support takes. Whether you've been here 5 minutes or 5 years, the support you give and continue to give the podcast is deeply appreciated by me and by everyone at the network. As we get into this episode, how is your week going so far? How was your weekend? So far, so good on both. Not much to report. It was a very quiet weekend. Can't think of anything that was particularly noteworthy. Just kind of the same old, same old. We're finally having some fall weather, so I am wearing long sleeves for the first time in forever. And it's kind of nice. I enjoy it. Give me a couple of months and I'll be sick of all my sweaters and wanting to have warmer weather to wear different tops. That's just how I am. Constantly bored with whatever season it is and whatever clothes I'm wearing. Let me know if you're the same way or if you just are less impatient than I am or something. I'm always looking forward to the I wore socks for the first time, I think on Thursday last week. I wore socks for the first time this fall. It hadn't been warm enough. Even when I take the dogs for a walk at night, I still hadn't needed to put on socks for the longest time. And now finally, and we're getting some rain, which we very much need. But we are not here to talk about socks or walking my dogs or whatever it is that I am blathering on about. We are here to talk about books, and I am here to bring you an author interview. This week I am speaking with author J.E. Weiner about her book, The Wretched and the Undone. This is Southern Gothic. It's historical fiction. It is a saga. Let me give you the description of this book. A sinister specter is hell-bent on revenge, and an ethereal woman in white is desperate to repel the menacing force. A battle rages for the hearts, minds, and souls of the Anderwalds and their extended family of immigrant outcasts, Arab camel wranglers, wounded warriors, and a songstress on the verge of madness. A sweeping Southern Gothic saga unfolds in the Texas Hill Country, where history's silenced voices rise amidst an astonishing tale that defies expectations. On the eve of the Civil War, Polish immigrants Marcin and Agnieszka Anderwald arrive in Bandera, Texas, seeking a new beginning. But when Marcin crosses paths with a vengeful ghost known as the Shadow, their dream quickly turns into a nightmare. The Anderwald's baby drowns, and Agnieszka is convinced she is to blame. She starves herself to death, returning from the grave as a ghostly woman in white, determined to protect her family. Marcin and Agnieszka's son, Zacharias, burdened by grief, becomes entangled in a quest for vengeance that threatens his very soul. As he and his wife, Liza, clash with the relentless shadow, they cling to hope when blessed with a child, John Marcin Anderwald. But the curse of the Anderwalds is unyielding. John Marcin grows up amidst murder trials, haunting executions, and the ever-present shadow that seeks to destroy his family. His love for the troubled sister Anna Schult leads to further heartache, and his sons, Luke and Junior, inherit a legacy of sorrow and secrets that could tear them apart. As the Anderwald legacy unfolds, each generation faces its own harrowing ordeal, where love and sacrifice are pitted against an unrelenting evil. Will they break free from the shadow's curse, or will they remain forever wretched and undone? And again, that is the description for The Wretched and Undone. There are a lot of genres you might have heard in there. There is historical fiction, obviously. There is Southern Gothic, as you heard. There is a bit of a mystery involved, just in a lot of areas and the generations. There is four generations, so you've got this family saga, right? There's a lot of entry points into this story. If you are a fan of Southern Gothic, you might be interested. If you're a fan of supernatural, you might be interested. If you're a fan of historical fiction, you might be interested in this book. So there's a lot of different entry points, as I said. And really, we meet the Anderwalds in the 1860s. We hear generations of their story. Even this everything that they go through, the amount of heartache that they experience as a family throughout the generations would be enough. But then you add this supernatural element, and you have to wonder, as a reader, well, would their lives be different if there wasn't this supernatural element? Is there something that is the supernatural element the cause, or is there something with this family that's, generational trauma, generational cycles? Would that be the same if there weren't these elements? But you do have those elements. You heard there's the shadow, there's the white one, the woman in white, kind of very expected tropes in this type of story, very expected characters in these types of stories, battles of good versus evil, etc. So lots of different entry points. But we're going to let Julia, she writes under J.E. Weiner. First name is Julia, but if you're looking for her, look for J.E. Weiner. We're going to let Julia talk about this book, the writing of this book, the inspiration, of course. So let's go ahead and turn now to the conversation with J.E. Weiner. The book is The Wretched and The Wretched and Undone. Excuse me. Hi, Julia. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. I'm excited to talk about the book. Before we get to the book, though, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about yourself so my listeners can get to know you, that would be great.
Sure. Well, I am a native Texan who is in blissful exile on the west coast of California, living up in Northern California. I have come to writing of late and have just released my debut novel in March of 2025, and I'm really excited to talk to you about it today.
Yeah. Where in Texas are you from?
So I grew up in Dallas.
Okay. I
Yeah.
lived in Plano briefly, um,
Yes, I
for a
know
few
exactly where
years.
that
So
is.
I know
Yes.
the area a little bit, but that was 20 years ago. It's changed a lot, I know.
You wouldn't recognize it today for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the book is called The Wretched and Undone. Can you give an overview, please?
Sure. Well, it's a searing Southern Gothic family saga. Takes place over four generations, and it's the story of the Anderwalds of Bandera, Texas, who arrived from Poland on the eve of the Civil War, seeking fertile soil, faith, freedom, only to find themselves dropped in the middle of absolute and abject violence and chaos at a time in our history that is not super pleasant.
Yeah.
And the character in the first part of the book, Marcin Anderwald, finds himself conscripted into the Confederate forces, and events transpire. He is involved in the death of a young private who comes back to haunt him and the next three generations of his family. But I
Yes.
think it's more than just a family story. It's a love letter to the Texas Hill Country, if you ask me. And I think while blistering, it is definitely a love letter to a place that is special and in my heart as a
Yeah.
place in my time in my family.
Yeah, Hill Country is amazing. I mean, if I had to live in Texas again, that would be my choice.
Yeah, probably
But
me too.
yeah, yeah, who comes back to haunt him? Literally, we're talking not just like regret and those sorts of things. No, this is literal.
Mhm.
Um, what was your inspiration for the book?
Well, surprise, surprise, a good old-fashioned Texas ghost story that took place. My sister bought a ranch on Texas Highway 16 some years ago between Bandera and Medina. It's an important distinction in the area. They're two different towns. And she was bringing groceries in one night, and a woman in white who was dressed in sort of 1800s era clothing drifted across her front yard. She was very pregnant at the time, and so she thought she was just exhausted and seeing things, and she didn't think much of it. And some months later, she stumbled into the kitchen as her husband was yelling through the window, "Get in here, you'll catch your death of cold. You don't have a coat on." And he thought he was yelling at her, and he was actually yelling at this woman who was walking across their front yard. And then not too long later, they had a babysitter who was staying overnight, and this apparition stood over the young woman in her bed holding out papers, and she said, "I will never babysit for you again."
I was just going to say that would have been my response.
That was it. So who was this woman? Where did she come from? And why won't she leave? Was something we talked about when my sister recounted this story to me, and it just stuck in my brain and became the inspiration for the book.
Yeah. Southern Gothic, which makes sense considering the inspiration. Would you naturally lean toward writing Southern Gothic if it weren't for the inspiration, or what do you think?
So, perhaps other writers approach things differently in terms of genre. I think people who write cozy mysteries, right, that's a genre that is very prescripted, and there's a method to how you write those books. I wrote the story I wanted to write and then really realized it was Southern Gothic.
Okay.
And so I do think I'm naturally drawn at the end of the day, looking back to the genre, although this has a splash of the classic Western, as well as what's a new sort of buzzword, Texas noir, if you will. I think it has a lot of those influences as well. But that kind of dark sensibility, that notion of otherworldly forces messing with us, that sort of struggle of right and wrong, good versus evil, and good doesn't always necessarily win. I think those were sort of themes that really drew me and drew me to the story, drew me to the genre. So it wasn't intentional, but I think it was meant to be.
Yeah. I like that she says it wasn't intentional, but maybe it was meant to be, right? And I said at the beginning that as you're reading it, you wonder, would this family have had the generational trauma, the generational cycles, if it weren't for the paranormal, the supernatural elements within the story? And I don't know, sometimes I felt like maybe they would, sometimes I felt like maybe they wouldn't. It's hard to say because this is the story that is written. This is the story that we're reading. But yeah, I think that it could have been a family saga of this family and the difficulties that they faced, but adding in the element of the shadow and Agnieszka's lady in, she comes back as a woman in white. I think that adds a totally new element and a different dimension to the whole story. You get that Southern Gothic, that Texas noir feel to it. So very, very interesting. Yeah, and have I heard the phrase Texas noir? I feel like I have, but I hadn't really thought much about it. I love that there's so many different things, different words to describe. You don't just have the same boxes that you've always had in terms of describing fiction of genres. And you get Southern Gothic, you get Texas noir. I don't know. Personally, I enjoy that. But we're going to go ahead and take our first break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking about 4 generations of Anderwalds as characters in this book. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on their fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author J.E. Weiner. As we get into this second segment, this is your second and final reminder to go to gsmcpodcast.net if you would like to help the podcast and the network as a whole in a monetary fashion. You're going to see that playing in the video next to me. As I remind you frequently, you also see it scrolling throughout the episode. So if you need a reminder, it is scrolling at the bottom of the box where it says GSMC Book Review Podcast and the title of the segment. Just in case you were wondering. I mean, it's moving. It probably catches your attention. But if you would like to help, gsmcpodcast.net. Thank you again. Thank you as always. Your support means the world to me, and I am grateful for all of you. As we get into this second segment, we were talking before about some of the inspirations for the book, the fact that the book is Southern Gothic, but also historical fiction, also this sweeping family saga, and how maybe the Southern Gothic part was a little bit unintentional, but possibly meant to be. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with J.E. Weiner. 4 generations, so there's a lot of characters to get to know as you read through the story. What about the Anderwalds as a whole maybe will resonate with readers?
Yeah. Well, I think this is not just a Bandera, Texas story. And interestingly enough, they're called the cowboy capital of the world. And it's a very interesting town. It's a crossroads in history, both Texas and US history. And so therefore, I think this is also a Texas story and also a quintessential American story. So what I think will resonate are the notions of an immigrant tale, immigrants coming to a new world, the forging of a frontier and the grit that took for so many to build this country. And I think that it is also about the power of faith and family and picking yourself up from the ashes time and again. And I was thinking about it because it is called The Wretched and Undone for a reason. It's not a hopeless book. There is hope in the book, but it is about humans being flawed.
Mm-hmm.
And humans in families are flawed at scale. And so really, I think it's how do you navigate family dynamics as well as some of the more historical thematic elements to it that I think will resonate with readers.
Right. And how do we pass things down through generations? Maybe sometimes not even realizing it.
Yes. Intentionally or not. Yes.
Yeah. When it comes to writing something of this scope, because you are covering generations, for you personally, how do you keep track of details?
Yeah. Well, so I think a huge learning for me in writing this book is I really just there are two schools of thought, right? They're the writers that call themselves pantsers, where you just sort of sit down and you write until it all kind of comes together, or planners who, outline everything. And I started as a pantser and I started to write. And then I realized, wait a minute, you've got an 80-year-old woman having a baby. Like that doesn't make any sense. Or wait, that didn't happen that way because I knew what the history was. So I stopped and I went back and I did an historical timeline. I also did a family tree that really helped me. But I had to kind of get to that place where I could sort it out in my mind. So about halfway through the novel, I did those two things, went back and fixed the bumps and then moved forward from there and really wrote to the historical outline from there. So that's what helped me the most.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to characters, you said you started out as kind of a pantser. So did you have a really good understanding of some of your characters, or did those evolve as you wrote?
Well, so a number of the characters in the book are based on people in my life or people in my life who have those people in their lives. So I think there are, and I had done enough reading about the founding families. It's a defined group of people in this town. This town is very small, even to this day. I went to the local Polish church on a visit at one point in time, and there's a granite obelisk with all the names of the original Polish settlers. And so I knew who those families were. A lot of the characters are amalgams of actual people, so that helped. But so much for me, the first thing is, what do they look like? What do they sound like? What do they smell like? How tall are they? What color are their eyes? I really sort of close my eyes and jot down sort of every character that as I see them. And then I think about, okay, what do they want? What have they lost? What have they gained? what are they looking for, and really kind of think about that. And then I say, well, where are they then placed in time? Because they can't be characters unless you're doing a time travel novel, but I'm not. So
Right.
it have to be appropriate and placed in time. And so those are the kind of three things that I think about with each character. And then I invent characters around them that I need to help propel their stories.
Yeah. Okay. That
That's
makes
how I think
sense.
about it. Yeah.
You've talked a little bit already about some of the things that you've researched, but was there any research that you did that really stood out for you?
Yes. There was a newspaper man, his name was J.M. Hunter, who came to settle in Bandera. And he was there in the mid 1800s into the early 20th century. And he started writing a newspaper. He started a very early days newspaper in Bandera that are still archived. And then he also had a magazine called the Frontier Times magazine, where he would put interviews and oral histories and other sort of micro histories of the region
Interesting.
into the magazine. So I read every word. He wrote a book called The Pioneer History of Bandera County. I read that book, which had a ton of material in it. So that was the starting place. Another great source within those newspapers is when you look at the obituaries, the birth announcements. They'd often have a what's on sale at the General Mercantile. They'd have a list of who'd been in the jail over the weekend and why.
Hmm.
Those were really interesting. And the mid to late 1800s was also a time of diaries. A lot of people wrote diaries. And so there's snippets of those that you can find online and then, of course, in libraries. And then the final thing, and I will do a plug for the Frontier Times Museum, which was founded by J.M. Hunter in Bandera. It is the richest local history museum I've ever been to. It's everything from saddles of famous rodeo heroes from Bandera and cattle ranchers in their spurs, through to quirky stuffed animals from the region. So quirky taxidermy displays. And,
We're not talking about cute stuffed animals, right?
and pictures of the settlers and stories. And it is just a magical place to sort of uncover those in between things in a story. Yeah.
Speaking of the Frontier Times Museum, the book is bookended with a conversation, and
Mhm.
I won't, especially not the second part of the conversation, won't go into it. But can you talk a little bit why you chose to uh, bookend with that particular conversation?
Yeah. Well, so that character is very much based on a real life character in my life. And I wanted, it was sort of what is the precipitating tell me the story moment? That's the prologue. And then, well, then why the heck is this woman asking for that story? And then you
Hmm.
come to perhaps find out or not. And so it was a way to sort of kick the book off and tumble back in time,
Hmm.
just so that I do think when you invest in an epic as this is, readers have to know that there's going to be something at the end, or a little bit of a tease, a carrot to kind of get you through teeing the book up, right? The
Hmm.
historical fiction does have to go through some process to sort of set up the story.
Yeah.
And so for me, I thought that would be a great way to sort of bring readers in and assure them that there were some things that would get figured out along the way.
Yeah. Did you ever consider making that part bigger, or have you considered going back to some of that story? Again, trying not to give too much away.
Sure, for sure. Well, uh, sequel maybe someday. This
Okay.
book took a long time to write. There was a fourth. There are three parts to the book currently. There was a fourth part,
Okay.
and it did take it up to present day. And so the epilogue was a little bit different in its first incarnation, but there were some just realities of publishing,
Hmm.
and a little bit of where the story needed to start and land,
Yeah.
that went into deciding to take that part out. So that became a way to make up for that, I
Right.
think, in the
Okay.
book.
So maybe someday,
Maybe
perhaps.
someday.
Maybe someday, perhaps. I know for me, when I read the epilogue, I thought, "Oh, okay, all right, so that explains that, and that sort of fills in that spot. But I am intrigued and I would like to know more." And so that's why I asked the question, because if you've listened to this or watched this podcast for any length of time, you know that I always want to know more. You could give me a 40-year epilogue and I would still be like, yeah, but what about? So I am so nosy. Even when it comes to fictional characters, I want to know more. So maybe someday that works for me. I'm happy to hear that. We are going to take our next break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking about peacocks. So come back to find out why. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author J.E. Weiner. Before the break, we were talking about the prologue and the epilogue that surround this story, this saga of the Anderwalds, and my nosiness about what might be in store for some of the things we learned in that prologue and the epilogue and the characters within those two chapters. But let's go ahead and go back to the conversation with Julia. There is a peacock behind your head, which is, peacocks. Okay,
Yes,
not
too.
coincidence. Can you talk a little bit about the peacocks in the book?
Sure. Well, so there is no Peacock Bend, but I did have to make up a name for the ranch. The ranch is actually a real life place. This is my sister's ranch outside of Medina. And I wanted it to have its own sort of fictional name. Peacocks come in two ways. One, I've always loved peacocks. I went to school in Dallas, Texas, and our unofficial mascot were the peacocks that roamed the campus of our school. They were really annoying and they always tended to sound off during
They're
tests.
so loud.
Right. But they were beautiful and they were
Yeah.
just sort of part of, so I've always loved them. And then I discovered in doing some research that peacocks are, a lot of ranchers have them on their ranches to get rid of bugs and worms, and they do chase snakes, and they also sound alarms when things are amiss. They make a lot of noise.
Yeah.
So like coyotes or things coming into the fields. So I thought, well, what I got to put them in the book. And there's a great story, the story that's told in the book about it's an Indian sort of myth about how the peacocks got their feathers. And it goes back to that they ate poisonous snakes and the poison seeped out into their bodies and changed the color of their feathers. I was just like, this is just meant to be.
Right. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are you working after you write a saga? This is a terrible question, but are you working on anything now?
Yeah, I actually am. I've started my next novel, and I'm about halfway through. It is going to it's set in the same time frame as this, and it's actually a story I discovered in the research. It was a still to this day unsolved mystery. And some of the characters in that real life tale inspired the bad guy in the book. And so I am working on something that probably veers a little bit more into historical mystery for this next book. But yes, I am working on my next project.
Good, because I imagine you did so much research that that you could go in so many different directions besides what appears
Yeah.
in the book.
Yeah. And an opportunity to bring back some of the characters that I didn't feel like I got to spend enough time with, some of the B-roll characters in the book who I really loved, whether it's Z, the medicine woman and the midwife, or the Arab camel wranglers, or maybe some other people are going to make some cameos in the next book.
Yeah. What does your sister think of what you've done with her ranch and her maybe ghost?
Yeah. So she loves it. I have to say she was an early beta reader. I needed to make sure I didn't, and I'll tell you, that book 4, because that became a little bit more autobiographical. I had a hard time as an author going there because it was a little bit too close to home, quite literally and frankly. And so that was that was a conversation that we had. It was just I had absolute license to tell the story, but she definitely was like, That's a little close.
Yeah.
So that I think was feedback that I took. And then this story really, it predates that. It's something I've completely made up, but and I think that it works much better.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. This is your debut novel. Have you always wanted to write, or was it this specific story that got you to write? What was that path like for you?
So in my day job, I do a lot of writing. I do a lot of ghost writing. I do a lot of talking points and memo kinds of things for the world that I live in, and I work in nonprofit. So it's making the case for other things and other people. So I've always loved to write. And on the side, I've always written little things for the drawer. I've never aspired to publish them, but just little snippets or shots of dialogue that I've heard that I thought were funny, or things from my interactions with my kids. And so I've done that all the way along. But when I heard this ghost story, I was like, gosh, that would be a really cool book. And I talked about it for about 10 years, kid you not. And my husband was really tired of me talking about writing a novel and not doing anything about it. And so for a birthday present a few years ago, he signed me up for a continuing studies course called How to Write Your Novel and Keep It Going.
Oh, wow.
And cleared my decks, made it possible for me to spend every Wednesday night working in this, and then working every weekend writing for the class. And I wrote my first couple of chapters in that class. But I never looked back. So that really was the sort of inciting moment for me, anyway, to start writing.
Yeah, nice. One of those things where you're like, thanks, and also, dang it, why you
Called my bluff.
You
Called my bluff.
Um,
Gonna put up or shut up. That's kind of how.
oh yeah, there's that. Well, put up or shut up, that would be a piece of advice. What other advice would you give to people who are thinking about writing?
Yeah. I still remember the day. So I finished this book during COVID, and I had I totally took over my dining room for my day job, and I had one color tablecloth on one half of the table and a different one, and red was work, yellow was writing, and I would sit at that table and look at myself in the break front of my china cabinet, and that's how I did dialogue. I would speak to myself and drive my family crazy because I was talking to myself for years. And I remember going, the end. And I said it out loud when I finished my first draft, and I burst into tears.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh my gosh, I have just finished my first book. I never thought this would happen. What I didn't know at the time was that was not the end. That was just the beginning.
Yeah.
I'm a new writer. I had to redraft everything. I had to rewrite so much. I had to do a developmental edit. That was just the beginning. So I think knowing that just because you get through and you've got a big stack of paper and you write the end, it is really just the beginning. And I think about this great quote by Michael Crichton, who wrote Jurassic Park. I think it's something along the lines of, and I'm paraphrasing, books are written, great books are rewritten. And, that sort of has stuck with me. Another person is Stephen King, who writes something and then he puts it in a drawer, he says, for 2 months before he looks at it again and and boy, time really helps with the revisions process. So being patient and knowing that you're going to have to rewrite whatever you write a million times over before it's done.
But still celebrate that typing of the end, because it's got to be a huge milestone.
Oh yeah. But I do think sometimes people think, how hard can it be? And it's just so hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yes,
it's really hard.
Exactly. How hard can it be? I feel like, as someone who has read, I don't know, thousands of books in her lifetime, I could very easily have that attitude of how hard can it be? I've read so many books. I know how they're put together. I know what I like, what makes a good story. And yet for me, it's the opposite. Of course, that can also be my imposter syndrome brain. But for me, it's the opposite. I know what I like. I know what drives me crazy with books. I know when there are plot holes or editing issues or whatever it is that makes me just go, And for me, I think it's really freaking hard. There's a lot that goes into writing a good, well-crafted book. But I mean, that's just that's me. That's my personal take. At any rate, we're going to take our last break of this episode. When we come back, what does Julia read when she takes the time? You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my interview with author J.E. Weiner. Before the break, she was talking about advice for authors and what she has learned along this journey. That question that I talked about right before we went to the break, how hard can it be? Probably sometimes harder than others, sometimes easier than others, but a lot of work at any rate. But let's go back to the conversation with Julia. When you take time to read just for you, not for research, what are your favorite genres and who are your favorite authors?
I love a doorstopper. I love a really thick literary fiction novel. I'm the thicker the better. I just really enjoy that. I was a Russian literature minor in college, so really tormented souls often in literary fiction call my name. My favorite right now is the work of George Saunders, and most particularly his book Lincoln and the Bardo, which I find to be just a masterpiece. And he also weaves in a lot of historical documentation and quotes and things like that from the times that he's writing. But it is just, it's a book that haunts me, quite frankly. And I've read it 3 times now because I just find it so engaging. So literary fiction, I would say mysteries. I love mysteries, especially the sort of Nordic noir genre, or Lane. So Henning Mankell, Stieg Larsson, those are 2 of my favorites. And of course, I love Southern Gothic. So Cormac, a lot of people don't think of Cormac McCarthy as Southern Gothic, but he is. He's sort of the first person who bridged Westerns over into Southern Gothic because it was no longer man against nature. It was man against otherworldly forces too, in his work, especially Blood Meridian, I think is the most iconic. And I love Flannery O'Connor. I think she has such a biting wit that is, it's harsh, but so good. You can't look away. And then for a little levity, I love Patrick DeWitt. He wrote The Sisters Brothers, and he's kind of reinvented the Western. And I find his writing really fantastic. Those are just a few of my favorites.
Giant, though, thick hardcovers. You're not reading those in the tub, right?
No,
I've tried. It just doesn't work.
it doesn't work. But I can't listen to those. I really like the crack of a binding, the smell of the paper and the glue and the sit on a couch under an Afghan kind of reading. I haven't quite come around to the Kindle, although I know a lot of people have.
Well, I mean, it's easier to pack, but I completely understand the love of real books as well. So I don't know. I kind of like everything. Audiobooks, Kindle, real books. Just give me everything.
Oh, I appreciate it all, but if I had to, if I get to pick,
sure, yeah. If you just it's those questions. If you can only take one for the rest of your life, what will it be?
That would be hard.
People want to know more about you and the book, website, and any social media you're active on.
Sure. Well, the most consolidated place to find me is on my website, which is jeweiner.com. So JEWEINER.com. And there you can link through to my Instagram, hashtag #JEWeinerAuthor, or my Facebook, which is at j.e.weiner. And I also am on LinkedIn and Threads. So those are the best places to find me.
Okay. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to make sure that you brought up or highlighted during our time together?
Well, I just think that I am so appreciative of the current level of democratization of access to publishing. I think that I've had such a special relationship with my small press, History Through Fiction. I think there are so many great small presses out there, and I guess this sits a little bit in the what advice would you give to authors? The barrier to entry to the big five, six, or whatever you want to count of publishing houses is almost insurmountable.
Mhm.
But there's so many great stories out there, and just encouraging people to think about small presses, and self-publishing too has become so much more professionalized. I just think if you're willing to sort of lean in and be patient and grow some calluses on your ego, there are I think the payoff is really worth it. And so I'm also really appreciative of a lot of the podcasts like yours that have been open to authors from small presses and more independent minded authors. I think that's so important. And then of course our independent bookstores too. So
Yeah.
I think those are the things I'd just like to sort of give a shout out to, because we often forget to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And thank you also for taking time to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Well, this has been wonderful. This is my favorite thing to do on the weekend.
Thank you once again to Julia for joining me to talk about The Wretched and Undone. Very much appreciated. Remember, if you are looking her up, don't look for Julia, look for J.E. Weiner. That is what she writes under. That's what was in the captions throughout the episode. So hopefully you noticed that. But yeah, if you're looking for her as an author or looking for her on social media, remember to look under J.E. Weiner. Weiner. And thank you to her once again. As I said at the beginning, lots of entry points into this book. So if you're a fan of historical fiction, if you're a fan of Southern Gothic, if you're a fan of paranormal, if you're a fan of family dynamics and generational sagas, or just generational, all the things that happen in families over generations, what cycles do we break, what cycles do we perpetuate, etc. All really good reasons to read The Wretched and Undone. Are there some dark things that happen? Are there some sad things that happen? Are there some hard things that happen? Yes, of course. But there's also just some really good, interesting, it's just the way she tells the story, and it's so easy to imagine this place and this family and everything that's going on, and trying to figure out how all the pieces fit together and what's going on with the prologue and the epilogue, and there's lots of good things, and it's not without hope. So don't think it's just dark and dreary, because it is not. So don't let that be a detriment to, if any of those other things that I just mentioned sound good, definitely check out the book. And yeah, thank you for joining me. Thank you to Julia for joining me. I hope that you will join me for the next interview. I will be speaking with author Laura Rissau, and I'm going to double check how to pronounce her name with her when she is here. As I said last week, when I pronounced Julia's last name incorrectly because I was unsure, and thankfully she told me how to do that. But Laura Rissau, I think, for her book, The Alchemy of Flowers. And we're out of historical fiction, we're into contemporary fiction, but there's still something going on. Myth, not sure, definitely secrets. Let me just give you this. Help wanted. In search of a gardener for the ancient walled Jardin du Paradis in the south of France. Unique and rustic lodging provided. Off the grid in all ways. One must grow flowers from one's own merde. If you don't speak French, that word means sugar honey iced tea. Make that into an acronym. You'll know what merde means. So you're growing flowers out of your own crap to be more polite, since try not to swear in this podcast. So I'm looking forward to talking to Laura and learning more about this book. And I am only partway through it, so I got to find out what's going on with all of the secrets and yeah, just because right from the get-go, I have questions, and so I'm waiting to see what questions are answered, how they're answered, etc. But please do join me for that interview. In the meantime, I hope you're having a great week. I hope that if you have not done so already, you will consider liking, following, subscribing on whatever platform you are either listening to or watching the episode on. Helps the algorithm. Something else that helps the algorithm, not only for this podcast, but for your authors that you read and love. Leave a review. Very, very helpful for the podcast, for authors. Gets everything out to more people. And I appreciate it. Authors appreciate it. Please leave a positive review. It's not hard. I used to completely overthink them, and now I realize that you don't have to. It's not brain surgery. It's not rocket science. Just say, hey, I like this book because, or I like this podcast because. Positive reviews are awesome. Thank you. Also, if you want to follow the podcast on social media, you may do so, and I would love to hear from you. You can find the podcast on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. Please come find the podcast. You get me by extension, of course, and tell me what you're reading. Tell me, we're coming into the holidays. Halloween is over. Thanksgiving's coming up. Many of you are already in full-on Christmas. Have you started watching Christmas movies? Have you started reading Christmas books? I am still in the fall zone. There's somebody out there. Hey, write some really good Thanksgiving books. I know they exist, but I need more. I love holiday reading, so I need more Thanksgiving books. Write the book you want to see in the world. I know. Shut up. I hear it in my own head as well. But tell me what you're reading. Do you read based on time of year? Are you a fan of reading books that are around the holidays that we are currently going into? And if you are, Diwali just passed. If you know of any good Diwali books, let me know. I know some really good Jewish authors who write books set around Hanukkah. Other Jewish holidays. I'd love to read books about that. Hit me up. Let me know. I love to read holiday-themed books, no matter what the holiday. And I can learn more about other cultures, other religions, other holidays. Please let me know. That's my appeal for the end of this podcast. I hope you're having a great week. Whatever the week is throwing at you, though, I hope what I hope for you every week, and that is that you have plenty of time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to